This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For March 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Chris Decter. I'm joined by Mark, Larry, Justin, and Jamie. And today's topic is a real humdinger. We are going to solve the age-old debate of aspect ratios. We all have different aspect ratios. We all use different aspect ratios. There is one true aspect ratio we should all be using all the time. It solves all your problems, and we will tell you what that is momentarily.
It is an age-old question for sure. All the old historic documents we've dug up in all the museums all talk about it, so we will put it to rest today.
In ancient texts in the Library of Congress, there's a whole wing devoted to it. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, they dig them up, and it says, what aspect ratio should I be using?
I figure if Hollywood can standardize on it, so can we.
Good luck.
Justice League, I think, rings a bell.
Before we get to that,
you got to that, didn't
you? Before we jump into all that, I guess here's a conversation grenade for you guys. I want to throw this out there. Because I know this came up in conversation, was it 2 weeks ago? And I was suddenly faced with 4 people shouting about how much they all agreed with each other on this particular topic, even though they didn't realize it. So this should be a bit fun for us. What are your thoughts on major PC manufacturers making commercial displays? We're seeing this from several of them. Some just OEM and put their name on them, but others are actually manufacturing them. And I understand several of you have used the same line of displays from the same manufacturer who will remain nameless, but they are based out of Central Texas.
Until we name them. So,
and
no promises.
But you've been using these displays with varying levels of success. So this was pretty interesting a couple weeks ago, and let you guys hash this one out. What are your thoughts on these displays? Worth it?
On the surface, they seem very worth it. And I think that's the allure of this thing, right? And so I think there's more to it. There's some function that we're looking for, and I'll kind of clear some of that up. We're looking for larger than 70, 80 some inch touch-enabled display with lots of input options and ability to tie into our control systems natively, right? And so that was our use case, and on the surface we found this brand of display that made by a major PC manufacturer out there. And we were like, man, this is checking all the boxes of the things we want to have in a display. Let's give it a shot, right?
And if I recall, they priced them very aggressively.
It was aggressive, yeah. I was like, this is attractive price point. Yeah.
And that was the thing for, look, why are we even beating around the bush? It's the freaking Dell displays. All right, anyway.
It's the Dell. Now, it's the Dell. It's the big Dell.
But and we did the same thing, only I didn't care about like all the other crap, right? What I was looking for was an 86-inch display for a reasonable price, a professional, the unseen air quote symbol, a professional display. And I noticed that, I was looking at the NEC C series, and then they have the Dell C series. Interesting. Same form factor. What is it? And when we got the pricing back, it was $1,800 cheaper than every other commercial display on the market of the same size. And it had touch and the USB switching and all the inputs and all this stuff. I'm like, well, let's do it. I bought 9 of them.
Yeah. So I didn't go that deep. We were like, okay, let's give it a shot, right? Well, I'm willing to try this. And the department who wanted it had another variant of this same display out there. Now, they weren't integrating it with control systems and the like. And so I brought my programmer in and I said, hey, this is listed on a manufacturer's website as being enabled for IP control. It's on the list, says it is.
And just for clarification, this is the programmer who refuses to do anything over RS-232, correct?
Refuses. That's a hard
I'm
term, but
saying,
yeah.
Dad,
You can call it out.
Where
you
you fell down.
Yeah, this is where
Like,
it falls apart. So hey, listen, I cut the Kool-Aid line to converge to IT, right? And people are dropping like flies around me. It doesn't matter. I'm getting my Kool-Aid. I don't give a shit at this point. And so we're going IP for our control. And yes, that was one of our criteria, is that can this be easily integrated with our control systems via IP? And it is on the list. It says it can. Now, we'll get into details about why it may not. However, that other part, that USB switching was like additive sweetener on the deal for me. I was like, this is perfect. These are going to be in collaborative rooms. We're going to have an installed PC, but maybe we're going to get a chance to extend that touch capability to the BYOD audience, which would be awesome. And
the USB switching works really,
I was
really well.
impressed.
It does. It does that stuff. And like I said, it met all the criteria. And we got the huge box. It showed up, put it up there, and the first question happened right away. Our integration. Where's the MAC address on this thing? How can I get this online? And so we're ripping the box apart. We're trying to put it up on the wall. We're like, where's the label? Where is the hardware address for this piece of equipment? It is IP enabled. And my guess is Dell has dealt with network stuff in the past. I cannot imagine this is the first time they're going down the road of IP anything.
Network?
Right. And so that was the first alarm that started going off. We're like, well, this is awfully odd that there's not a hardware address on the box, any documentation, on unit itself. And to go one step further, it's not available in any of the menu structure either.
Oh, yeah. That's what we discovered. It pissed us off because we do statics. Like, what the hell?
Right. So, just if you're listening, Dell, put a MAC address on your stuff, because if you're going to get into the IT thing at some point, people are going to want to see that. And contrary to popular belief, you don't just plug it into the network and it gets an IP address. It is an exchange. You do need to put that in a table and then it is given an IP address. So take notes, please.
Put a sticker with that MAC address on the back panel.
Yes, please. But that was our first red flag. Okay, whatever. We'll figure it out. And we did get to it. We were able to set up a fake network, get into the server interface that's on the box.
Which server interface?
Get to the MAC address. And right, exactly.
There's two.
The hidden one, but that's
there's two. And then so we were able to reverse engineer the MAC address so that we can then get it on the network and statically assign it. Cool. Now we can get to the interface and start doing things with it. But it started to unravel a little bit more at that point. Right? We had other issues with the audio switching or lack thereof within it by way of the IP controlled interface.
Yes, we struggled with the volume control.
It was nice.
Just going up and down.
Yeah, we struggled. It worked really well on one of the inputs. However, that control did not extend to the other inputs. Don't know why. And Larry, I'm going to let you chime in here because I think you dealt with some of this specific control side elements of this display and where things went sideways.
Well, I think the thing that separates our experience was I did the programming. When I realized that the IP control didn't work as expected, I just did ours to 232, and I quickly found out that didn't work as expected either. But at least there, I could kind of fake my way around. Like when the device quit responding, I knew that was a separate command to wake it back up versus when it just said it was off. And so, like, I was able to work my way around most of it just by polling and trying to guess where the monitor was at any given time.
And I think it...
But the audio is what got me.
And I think it...
Because...
It's due to note that like, we're using... Like, I use a different Tron to program... And I have the same experiences than the Tron you're using to program. And there's...
It's not a Tron
issue.
So
I want... Because people are going to say, well...
And those Tron movies are great.
Connected. Tron connected.
No. Yeah.
Until the flash died on it.
I've controlled it with two different control systems. Same issues both ways. Yeah. It was easier with one of them that I could actually do some real polling and get some stuff out. But what my issues with the audio was, it has a audio out that's analog, but it's the weirdest thing. Like, you can still send volume up, volume down commands to it, but it's not a variable audio out. The only thing that does is it turns the speakers back on again. And so it's completely
Isn't that what you want?
useless for, I'm assuming
You wanted to hear audio, Larry. Come on.
Yeah, I originally had it in my head that I was going to put a nice sound bar underneath it with the camera and mics built in. Nope, that didn't work.
I did
at
the
all,
same
so.
thing. But we did get past that, the power thing. We were able to get continuous when actually off, turn back on. There was a double secret menu within another double secret menu.
That's where things started
page,
going awry with
4
us.
pages deep in there.
Is when you turned it off or in standby, it turned off the network port.
Take notes, Dale, or anybody who's manufacturing things off.
Which
you
is
need
when
to be
I
able to
switched
turn
to
back
RS-232.
on.
And I did the same thing.
Actually, Jamie, that's common. A lot of ones, when they go into their low power standby, they work only on IR or 232 only, and it's aggravating across the board. So it's not just that.
And in the easy menu,
I concur.
in the easy menu, there wasn't a way to bypass that. Right? You have to get into the double secret. What's the dumb movie thing? The double secret probation.
Double secret probation.
Yeah.
Menu.
It is. It's buried in there. It's wedged, and it's not clear when you get there either. It's like written in some cryptic way. It's like maybe this is it.
And then finding a manual on
hallelujah,
Dell's
it works.
website is the best.
Oh, all manuals for this are pictographs. There's nothing even. There's no words at all in it. It's just like, okay, cool, and here's a nice little fold out 8-page
That's
pictograph.
to stop you from searching.
Yeah. I
Good
think
luck with that.
I tried to.
All this being said, though, if I needed a 86-inch 4K interactive monitor, it would still probably be one of my top ones now that I know all the gremlins to work around.
It has a learning curve. There's definitely a learning curve involved with it. And I think the monitor thing, don't confuse this as a giant TV or anything. It behaves more like the monitor on your desktop than it does a typical display that you put on a wall.
Which
so happens to be
no
86
audio,
inches.
just interactive touch.
Yeah, and it's
display.
really nice in that regards. And I think it goes back to Mark saying is it does everything you want. Everything you want.
Everything you
USB switching, it touch, it's got everything. Except you can't control it easily, and it's flaky as all get out. But we also had an issue with the place I bought 9 of them for. They're all Apple computers, and the Apple software doesn't come with it. It's an extra licensing fee. And so you have to strong arm your Dell representative to get the free license to have the Apple software for it. If you have Windows, it just works.
Well, to be fair, it does say Dell on the front. So.
If you have Windows, it just kind of works. But you're selling it to an education institution.
That's on you.
Right? You're selling it to an education institution. You're marketing it to education institutions. And they say, like on their website, it says, hey, download this free software. And you download the free software. And it works for 2 weeks. On day 15, it tells you it's $120 a year. But it's free software. And so...
Yeah, it's free to download.
But once everything was going, I agree with you guys. It's a really nice monitor. And I got all that extra crap for the price. It was $1,800 cheaper than anybody else's. For us.
It's a lot of bang for the buck.
For us.
It is a lot of bang for the buck. And it's a solid unit. It's not quite what I would expect for a display manufacturer. It does do a lot, if not all the things you want. However, it does not deliver any of the things you absolutely need in control and monitoring and easy deployment on the network. So would I recommend it? Probably. And, it's going to be a pain that'll probably pop up again in the future, but awareness precedes control, and hopefully we'll learn.
One other,
and if you go that route, plan on more programming time and more configuration time.
We even put the little micro thing in the back of it, and we discovered one other issue with that.
We did too.
Right? The display port out on the multi-pin connector, when you put in the micro, it was funky. We had multiples where it went crazy. And then if you mount it too close to the wall, you can't service the PC. And the dang thing weighs 4 bajillion pounds. So it's not just pull this thing off and get to the PC. So be very on purpose with your installation practices, because once you get that hog on the wall, you don't ever want to pull it off again.
It ain't coming down.
I mean, what's going to happen is if there are people listening to this right now, and you're in an IT silo of excellence of some level, there's an IT or AV different department. If you're in AV and your IT department, they're going to see this and say, hey, we're going to put this in Dean XYZ's office. What do you think? Is it going to work? Just buyer beware. It will work, and you will get a lot of feature. However, you're probably going to have some programmers and some people who have to service that. They're going to have words for you when it's all said and done. It's not going to be just drag and drop cookie cutter for them.
So let me ask this, as somebody who has used a smaller version of these. We used the 55s recently, and Jamie, I did like what that you mentioned, that the little micro PCs fit in the back, kind of like like an OPS style PC, but it's kind of integrated. And so that's nice if you use those. So, but it sounds like you get a lot of bang for your buck in general. You get a lot of feature set. There's a lot of quirks to the control and configuration aspects of it. Is this the sort of thing that you guys could see from so separate hardware and software on it? If they appropriately address these in firmware revs, would this be like a really solid go-to product? Hey, I have no qualms recommending this at all. Because it sounds like they could address everything you guys are talking about. It's like it's all seems to be software related, not hardware.
It's right there. It's so close. It's so close.
It's their custom firmware, and I've had the same experience with their projectors. It's almost identical experience with their projectors. That short throw laser they had that was 4K and 5,000 lumens. It was priced below everybody else. We bought a couple, and I had the exact same experience with that. What I find funny is that the 55, the 70, the 75, and the 86 all have their individual quirks, and they all have a little bit different firmware. And so if Dell could tighten that up on their projectors, and it's their own custom deal, right? We all know that these aren't made by Dell. They're by, like, again, the 86 just happens to be a C86 something QT. Some other major manufacturer makes that.
Certainly sounds like another manufacturer number to me.
So, Larry, didn't you find that depending on which size display it is, it's a different line of displays within that or something like that?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And the API is completely different across every one of them. And so, going in, it might as well come from a different manufacturer. You're going to find different bugs with each one.
And it's really weird because even if you knew that this particular one came from manufacturer X, manufacturers X protocols do not work with it. When they flash it, they flash it.
It's not theirs either.
So if they could tighten that up, Chris, to answer your question, absolutely. I would say buy them. If you have like a push cart situation where everybody's BYOD and you're not controlling it, put them in. I think they work wonderfully until you try to do the crap that we try to do. And then it's just...
Yeah. So because of who it is, if you treat it, you said it works like a monitor, not a display. But if you treat it like a monitor, that is to say, a monitor on my desk, a 27-inch monitor, I plug in, it powers on and off, it goes to sleep by itself. It just has power and a video connection. That's all it does. If you treat it that way, it sounds like, well, it works fine. It's just if you try to actually drive it, put it on the network, adjust volume levels on it, it's just like it's not reliable for that.
I mean, it's still probably a leading candidate for our large active learning environments where we need touch and collaboration. Right now, I'm looking at the field, and it's still out in front.
Interesting. Well, so there you go. There is a very lukewarm but potential positive recommendation from 3 of the 6 AV Super Friends to say this monitor is pretty good maybe in the future, but overall not bad.
They're adequate.
Yeah, it's a monitor.
That's
I think the price alone seems to be what's really getting people to look at it, and that's fine. And they lump it in with the same kind of, if you have a Dell contract, they have lump it in with the same service and support on that. So yeah, maybe they will address some of this in software. Unfortunately, I think what they'll probably do is come up with a slightly revved version hardware that has some of those fixes in it. So the ones you bought last year are still, sorry, that's what you get. And the ones this year have fixed some of that. So maybe in another 3 to 5 years, it'll be A-okay. So. Well, with that said, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and solve the problem of aspect ratios.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's the AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
Well, welcome back. So today's topic is aspect ratios, and which is let me rephrase. Today's topic is aspect ratio, singular, and which one you should be using, because there is one correct, true aspect ratio. However, just for sake of edification, and because it's fun, let's take a trip through. Let's take a trip through history. And so aspect ratios, that is to say, we'll go as basic as we can on this, but the comparison of width by height, which determines the size of an image or a video frame. That's what we're talking about. We're going to boil this down to like two numbers when we're done here. But before we get there, so if you go back and look at earliest like still photography where they started actually mass producing film for cameras, they often used 24 by 18 or 36 by 24. 36 by 24 then became known as 35 millimeter, even though it's not exactly 35 millimeter. But if you look at the numbers and look at that ratio is roughly 1:5 to 1. And the reason for that is because it lines up approximately with the human visual field. You see 50% wider than you do vertically. So just as you're standing there looking at something, you can see almost 180 degrees. You see about 120 degrees top to bottom. So when they started mass producing film for cameras, they did it so the frame that they were taking the photo in was approximating what your visual field was already. So that was kind of our first aspect ratio, was 1:5 to 1. And we've had that for several 100,000 years or more. When they started into the first actual, film recording systems, they used a modified version of that because they needed sprockets to run through it. And actually it shrunk it a little bit. So we ended up with 1:33 to 1. And that's where 1:33 to 1 or 4:3, which we're all familiar with because we still have PowerPoint and 4:3. That's where that came from. And that's over 100 years old. That's where that number, actually it's like 120 plus years old, in the 1890s, I believe. In the early teens, the Motion Picture Academy of America or whatever, MPAA, whoever they are,
the lawyers.
They came up with what they called Academy Standard, which was slightly narrower than 1:33. It was 1:37 to 1. And that was so they could get sound in there, a little soundtrack on the side by the sprockets. But it was essentially still 1:33 to 1. And that's where, when televisions then came out, they said, well, we're going to use that same aspect ratio because the films are in 1:33 or 1:37. And we can make our TV tubes in that same size. And thus, when you watch TV, you can see the same thing just like in the movies. It's great. And that was fantastic until a few years later when Hollywood realized people are just staying home and watching movies. They're not coming to the theaters anymore. So that's when they came out with all these different aspect ratios. There was Cinerama, CinemaScope, or anamorphic. There's VistaVision. You've got different versions of IMAX in there. And there are different aspect ratios, 2:5 to 1 or 2:5:9 to 1 with Cinerama, which was 3 projectors side by side. Super expensive, very cool if you can get it. There's still places that do that. Very cool if you can see it. We commonly know anamorphic or CinemaScope, which is 2:3:5 to 1, which also, by the way, is very, very, very close to 21:9. So if you have one of those cool monitors, you can drop your anamorphic films in there and they look great. VistaVision is also known as Academy Flat. That's 1:8:5 to 1, which is very close to what we now have on HDTV. So that actually works pretty well. You don't get much cropping there. IMAX is its own thing. They do their own crazy stuff. They're very high vertically, 1:9 to 1 or almost 2 to 1. But that's vertically very high because if you recall the old traditional IMAX,
super tall.
Yeah, cinemas, they were very tall. You sat in a very steep raked auditorium because they wanted to fill your entire visual field vertically because it was very impressive that way. So then in the late 80s, we start moving towards home widescreen televisions. And there's this big debate on which aspect ratio to use for those. What size are they going to shape them? What are they going to look like? George Lucas was a huge proponent of going 2 to 1. He liked that more cinematic feel. Where the manufacturers landed, those manufactured to industry groups landed on 16:9. And the reason for 16:9, so this will boil down why 16:9 exists. Why is that? That's a strange number. Why did you pick that? 16:9 or 178 to 1. It is a compromise between 4:3, which was the narrowest common film aspect ratio, and 2:3:5 to 1, which was the widest common film ratio. There were wider ones. There's 2:7 to 1. David Lean was famous for that. But if you take, so you can do this yourself if you want to get out some straws and napkins and things, but you can map out a 16 by 9 rectangle, and you can overlay a 4:3 rectangle over that and a 2-3-5 to 1 rectangle on that, and you get roughly the same amount of letterboxing, top and bottom on a 2-3-5 to 1 in a 16:9, and that's roughly that same visual amount is on the sides on a 4:3. So it was basically them just compromising, hey, neither of these are going to fit on one of these images. What's the one aspect ratio we can come up with for TVs at home? They're going to look roughly the same for either 4:3 or 2-3-5 to 1. So that was where that came from. Well, this was the late 80s, and of course we didn't really get wide adoption of HD TVs or wide aspect TVs until the very early at the late 90s into the 2000s.
90s, yeah.
The old giant plasma displays and DLPs are monsters. It wasn't very common. Now they're, you can get them for $300 at or less at Best Buy. But around the same time, so computers were taking off. The micro PC, the home PC, was taking off in the early 80s, and they just used television tubes, which is why they started with 4:3. They're like, look, somebody already makes these tubes. We can do these same things. We can adapt these and put our graphics array into this same monitor, and why not? There we go. And that was great. And we did that for 25 plus years or so. In the early 2000s, we started to see some monitors take on a slightly different aspect ratio. They didn't go wide, they went taller. They went, and some of you may remember this, they went to 5:4 or 1:5 to 1. The reason for that was they were able to, if you think about it, it's slightly taller. You're able to maintain the same content field on a 4:3, but you got a little bit more vertically for those static UI elements, functionally your menu bars. Mac, Windows, Linux, they all have menu bars that are always there, but that way you got roughly the same amount of screen real estate, more or less, for your content, but you had a little bit more space for your menu bars. So we had monitors in 5:4, which were just a little bit bigger than regular monitors, but they were also kind of geared towards, professionals or content creators, people doing photography and video editing. That was kind of their market. It's real niche.
Yeah, that stuff's never going to catch on. You're never going to
No one's
anything on a computer. Come on now.
When HD TVs started to become more and more common because the prices came way down, the manufacturer said, well, look, if we're already making these pieces of glass at this aspect ratio, let's start making computer monitors and laptop screens and things in that same aspect ratio, because the way they make these pieces of glass are these huge sheets of glass, 10 to 12 feet across, and they can divvy it up. And if you use the same aspect ratio of the same size or the same ratio of the pieces of glass, even if they're different sizes, you can divvy that up and it makes more sense from a manufacturing standpoint. It was cheaper to manufacture. So now we started to see most computer monitors even become 16:9 to match up with the with the home displays that you were getting for your HD TV. So 16:9 started to take off. Now, for a little bit, and you can still get them, there are 16:10 displays that use the same exact reasoning as the old 5:4 displays or the 1:5 to 1 displays. They're a little bit taller than a 16:9 because of those static computer UI elements, your menu bars primarily. And so you get the same amount of computer content on your screen, but then you get, a little bit more for menu bars and things like that. And again, it's kind of geared towards the professionals, the content creators, the video editors, the photo editors, so they can see their entire video frame, for example, but then still have some menus and toolbars and things floating around there. So they're not having to compromise what they're working on at the time to fit within the monitor itself, within the aspect ratio of the monitor. So, which leaves one more question. We brought it up on our show recently, was where the heck are all the 16:9 projectors? Why are most projectors 16:10? Well, from the standpoint of commercial projection, they're still kind of a business product, and business products are 16:10 because somebody said so years ago, and they've just never changed that. So as HD TVs kind of raced the price to the bottom and pushed 16:9, so what we're seeing for direct view displays for the most part are 16:9 aspect ratios. Projectors are for business and still 16:10, but they're also wrong. So the correct one true aspect ratio is 16:9, because the first thing you should be doing on your 16:10 projector is going into that menu and telling it it's 16:9, because you're sending it 16:9 content and you're projecting on a 16:9 screen, and thus everything is 16:9 and all problems are solved. The end.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
This moment in AV history was brought to you by Chris Decker.
So Justin, I understand that you've faced some pushback on 16.9 recently.
So, multiple fronts, and it made me realize and kind of reflected back on my life on when I realized that 16.9 should be the choice. And I remember this, and I don't remember the year. I don't remember where I was or anything like that.
That's a different show.
But I do realize, thinking through the process of why am I doing this 1610 stuff? And it wasn't because of what you all think. It was because of freaking power supplies. So how do power supplies relate to aspect ratios, you're asking? So this is where I get really pissed off about it. So when I do a lot of work for consultants and integrators, and this consulting work is mainly doing CAD work or this and that and the other, kind of helping them out. So if you're listening to this, I might have done some work for you at university. I've done plenty of designs out there, line drawing, stuff like that, just the CAD guy. Anyways, I asked all these integrators, when I say a lot, it's 8 or 10, maybe 11 that I do work for currently. And the reason why they always go 16 by 10 screens is because the projector's native 1610. And I asked the question, why? There's no 1610 content. It's like, well, the projector's native, so we throw in a scaler. It's like, aha, that's the reason why. So going back to when I realized that 16.9 was probably the appropriate reason anyway, I kept getting calls about failed power supplies on scalers and ceilings. And I got sick and fucking tired of changing the power supplies out all the time,
up there on a ladder
wasting
get there
15-foot ladders. Oh, got to go rent a lift for this one. Oh, I got to go drive 2 hours for this one over here. Oh, this one failed in the middle of these power supplies are $75 that take $100 to $200 of labor to change out sometimes, plus a lift rental. I just got sick of this shit. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to quote 16.9 screens, and I'm just going to send the content up there. And if they put an iPad in, it's just going to show up like an iPad. And I think I made the right decision because now everything's really 16.9. And I wish that integrators and consultants would realize that throwing a scaler, an expensive scaler, just because your projector is 1610 is a stupid ass reason, and it's going to cause your clients problems. Oh, guess what? Less than half, surprisingly, of these integrators reacted to, oh, it increases our support calls and gains us more revenue down the road. So think about this.
Intentional engineering that way down.
So
but you're seeing more manufacturing switching outputs
let's back up
too. So that's it's helpful, but it's not quite the answer.
No. So let's back up. Let's go back to the experience. So would you rather, as an audience member or a student in a classroom, like to see your video up on the screen in a 16 by 10 or 16 by 9 format, or do you care just to see the fucking video?
They don't care. Yeah.
They don't care, because when I run HD-based T straight into my projectors, guess what's not failing? The power supply of a scaler. Oh, and guess what I'm not doing? I'm not scaling. That's also something else that doesn't go wrong. I'm sick of it.
I just want whatever's on the screen to be exactly what the instructor sees on their preview monitors.
And that makes sense,
so
right?
I want that aspect ratio to be exactly the same. And if I put a confidence monitor on the back wall, it's going to be 16 by 9 because I can't get a large monitor any other size. And so to me, it's just matching every display to be exactly the same. And that means I have to go 16:9.
Oh, also, so there was, so Chris just chatted about a SKU thing on our chat that we're talking about. I want to bring this up as well. I saw on Twitter that somebody posted that the reason why projectors are 1610 are because of SKUs, and projector manufacturers don't want to carry 2 SKUs. I don't know about that. Yeah. I don't know about that, because did you all know, and if you read the fine print in at least half the projectors that I spec out there, I'm not going to name any names, that in fine print it says if you change to 16 by 9, it derates the light output of your projector.
Well,
So
that would be
that
true in the sense
means-
where it's still throwing
yeah.
out the same amount of light. You're just only using,
Your
X
a certain
amount of
percentage.
square
Yeah,
real
you're
estate.
blacking
So
it
I don't
off
know
and you're-
exactly what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
So if it has something to do with electronics, it's not really a
No, no,
skew
no, 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 no.
problem,
No,
right?
they're just showing black.
Okay.
And
What
so
they're
it's-
saying is, yes, if you
So
if
it's
you,
just literally that.
you're literally
Okay.
not using all the light it's throwing, but I don't care.
I don't care
No.
because it's going to work longer.
Yeah, I mean, the skew makes sense to me. Like, it does make sense that if they have some people that want 16 by 10 and 16 by 9, it makes sense for projector manufacturer X to produce one that could do either. It's just,
So-
we're going to set it for 16 by 9 and run with that.
Yeah, and you're right, Larry. It's safer if they do one that's too big. You can always squash it down. If you do one that's 16:9, yeah, you could window box it in, but yeah. So I get what they're coming from, but they're wrong.
Right. Yeah, and also, I mean, from a support perspective, I don't. How many times have you had those calls where the instructor they're likely they can even find where to adjust anything on there for their video output settings and trying to get it. Why does it not fill in the screen? Why?
Yeah.
So I think from our perspective is make it all the same, all the way through, so that our clients don't have to dance around
They
trying
don't
to
care.
figure out how to do it. They're just their skill set's not there. That's not what they're there to figure out in the middle of class. How to get that screen to fill up. They're there to teach.
Our
And you
support
set
calls
the
went
edit
up
table
whenever.
so they don't get options that break.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah, our support calls went up whenever we wouldn't match the monitor to the screen
Oh, yeah.
behind you, right? And hey, my content doesn't look the same. It's like, yeah, that's super important when you're in math and trigonometry and your circle looks like a fucking egg.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, had that.
So that's a problem. So
Well,
this,
and especially
I mean, just
especially years before,
stop
the monitor,
scaling.
the monitor there was 4.3, the projector was 4.3, everything was fine. And then someone brings in their new laptop, the laptop's 1610, your monitor here is 16.9, that's still 4.3, and it's like, what's going on? And to your point, Justin, now you've got all these scalars and all this crap going on, and for a couple of years, it looked terrible.
yeah, and I was guilty. I'm a guilty party. I did it. But you know what? I came out on the good end. I rehabbed. I got out of it.
It's just a problem you
I'm
can
on
throw
the
a big
brighter
pile
side
of
of
money on.
life.
Yeah, just throw some money at it; it'll go away.
I don't know. I guess coming up in the broadcast world, right, and starting out in the film and tape era, moving through digital video.
So you should be 100% on board with 16.9.
Well, you're used to all the different ratios, right? Because if you're on a VCR, it was or digital capture of VCR, it's 640 by 480. But if you're using DV, then it's 720 by 540, and then you start getting all these things. You just kind of get used to it, right? And I always tried to optimize the systems, and so I mean, I get where I get where everybody's coming from, right? But when I have a generic, you don't find them as much anymore. But let's step back three years ago, right? And all the monitors that came from the monitor manufacturers were all 1610 also. So if I had a 1610 monitor and I had a 1610 projector and I went ahead and bought the 1610 screen, I set the thing, most everything up to optimize the PC to 1610. And then if it was playing a video or something, it would flip down to the video resolution. And I did that because most of us now are used to, on any sort of screen, there's all these different aspect ratios in Hollywood. You're used to some sort of letterbox, right? You're used to some sort of pillar bar. You're used to something. So if you flipped over to a Blu-ray and it got cropped off at 16 by 9, you're just like, whatever. But because of my pickiness of I like having the extra room for the menu bars. I want to know that I'm taking every single pixel. Like, I'm notorious for the 1-to-1. I mean, that's on any of my displays. Now, when does that change for me? In modern, let's step up to today, not 3 years ago. It's just like what Larry said. When I have to start introducing supplemental monitors, large screen monitors of any kind, it's 16 by 9, whichever one of those resolutions that goes through. And increasingly more, the desktop monitors are coming in at 16 by 9 resolutions, unless you're getting into specifics where they're more monitors than they are mass-produced things. But then you get into all the weird ultra-wide screens, which you're not going to be pushing those into many of our standardized rooms, even though they'd intrigue me. Maybe someday I'll have extra money.
You're seeing
in my ultra income of higher ed AV, I'll be able to pop for a few of those.
Going back to like that conversation of like, and Chris, you said, okay, these were business, like, ready. And so things start off as business. And I think a lot of what our content was in the early days when we started deploying a lot of this was that simple piece, right? Okay, here's a spreadsheet or a Word document. It was very stripped down. We weren't doing as much media-rich content that we're doing today. So there's a whole lot more media that we're seeing in a teaching environment used every day and probably year over year. It's going to continue to rise. So now we're seeing like, okay, we've reached that tipping point where the majority of the content is media-rich, and it's less and less the old, PowerPoints that, there people are still going to use them, and there are spreadsheets happening, and it's people probably want to have their 5.4 or whatever, their 4x3, because they can get that on there. But I think it's just that tipping point, right? We're seeing more.
So a lot of that came from when the first computer started to go wide aspect in like 2001, 2002 timeframe. They went 1610 because it's a business machine and you're using this for business. We're doing business in here, get out, sort of thing. So to Jamie's point, yeah, when you were buying a wide aspect display and a wide aspect projector in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1610 made perfect sense because the computer's 1610, the monitor on the lectern 1610, the projection display is 1610. It's great. It all lines up. Where it gets wrinkly is as more and more people move to that HD TV in the home and those prices came down, and thus, to Larry's point, the big monitors are only available in 16:9 because it uses the same fabs. Now you're in this weird kind of multi-aspect ratio change. And so, Mark, you're right. I think the tipping point is the accepted resolution. The accepted aspect ratio is 16:9 because that's what we're used to. Where it gets even worse is now people are bringing their phones into classes.
I was just going to
try to use that. And phones aren't 16:9. They all have like a 16:9 mode, but very few of them are like true 16:9. There are some out there, but it's not as common.
That's something I was going to bring up too. And I know even in the broadcast world, the friends that I have that are still doing that and still in the newsrooms and such, there is so much content that's vertical. So much content. And people are almost, the generic Johnny Q public, Jane public, so that way we get both of them, Johnny and Jane public. And
non-gender specific public.
Yeah. So anyway, public, Mr. and Mrs. and those shall not be named public, they're so now everything they take, every video they take, every picture they take, everything they take is vertical. And they're starting to get to the point where they expect that in other locations. And I wonder if that will be, we all bitch and moan about the fact that 4K displays, some of them they're not all the same. Some of them are 38, some of them are actually 4, some of them are 5, some of them are a little less than 38, but not quite 2. And so even 4K's resolutions are all stupid. But I think the biggest disruption to our displays is going to be vertical. And because that's where everybody's headed. Everybody in their stupid phone. And I'm still old school.
It's not a stupid phone.
I turn it sideways.
It's actually a camera that just
is landscape.
To do phone.
And my kids are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Taking a real picture."
Using it correctly.
Yeah. You look weird, Dad.
Like,
you shouldn't be holding your phone like that.
What amuses me, Jamie, is those who try to do that, they remember too late. They start recording and they go, "Oh wait, let me turn it this way." But it doesn't switch in the actual recording, so now their video is always like this. So like, great, you recorded the entire wedding that way. Thanks a lot.
Or the square. The square is awful popular right now too.
That's a stylistic one, yeah. That's very stylistic to replicate the old, was it dual lens reflex cameras that were square.
But I know when
you want to get a kick out of aspect ratios, you ought to go to MTV Classic. So I was watching that the other day, just working, listening to those tunes, some Stone Temple Pilots or whatever. And they show all their music videos in 4x3.
STP is classic.
You get classic
rock. You know
rock,
what drives
right?
me absolutely bonkers?
STP is not classic rock.
No. Hold on, check this out. So they're streaming, they're broadcasting in 4x3 because when there's a new commercial on, it's 16:9 in the 4x3, so you have this massive letterbox on the top and bottom, and this little window in the middle. And I was like, "Holy crap!"
What drives
If I
me
were an advertiser, I'd be cheesed
what
at that.
drives me absolutely bonkers is that when you watch old sitcoms, like my wife has decided we're going to watch some Roseanne episodes, right? Well, that was in the early 90s, and it was all 4x3, right? Hulu doesn't 4x3 that. Neither does Amazon. They stretch it and crop the top and bottom.
They stretch it.
Yeah.
No, they don't. They just zoom in and crop it. They don't like stretch and I'm like, just leave it the way it was. Just leave it the way it was. Why are we dicking with it? Just
Well, it's probably that balance, like Mark says, that tipping point of how many calls or emails are they going to get are actually angry Twitter tweets. Angry tweets. I'm not a tweet person.
Not filling my screen.
Why is it not filling the screen compared to let's just do this? And people, like, I would turn that on and be like, what? I'm not going to watch this.
Well,
That'd be annoying.
the
like a show like
framing's all
this.
goofy. It's cutting them off above the eyebrow. You're like, okay.
At the hair, yeah.
There's some director out there just losing his shit.
Who's pissed.
Yeah.
He don't care.
Well, as long as he's still getting a syndication
I guess if he
check,
gets
it's
his
probably not
royalty
that,
check, he
but
doesn't
still.
care.
Yeah.
But still, man.
So that raises an interesting question, and this is something that's come up recently in the discussion of how people are teaching and learning and working now from home for the most part, and switching back to going back to, okay, now I'm going to go back to teaching or learning at a university. I'm going back to working in an office. Everyone's kind of gotten used to, or a lot of people have gotten used to this idea of I've got this big display in front of me, 27-inch or 32-inch or whatever it is, or I've got two of them and I stole them from the office. I can position windows however I want. So my content is not limited to this aspect ratio of the display. I'm functionally building my own aspect ratios as I shift the window around. And and you think about even like Zoom. So the Zoom window I'm looking at right now has everybody in 16:9 little windows, and there's 4 of you, so it's in a 16:9 video wall. It looks great. Whereas you do the same thing on Teams, it's constantly kind of playing with
Shifting, moving.
the aspect ratio to kind of square people in or get them to fit. So it's not even adhering to that anymore because it's also kind of this new model of you just want to see your content. I don't care what it is. And you can, as you resize the Teams window, it like resizes that video window. So I'm wondering, is this issue of the aspect ratio because the one piece of content I'm showing in a classroom or in a conference room, it doesn't match and look correct. But if I'm in this new model of I'm actually going to show in a different sort of context, I'm going to show 4 or 5 things on my screen at once, and I want the people in the conference room or the students in the classroom to look at all of that. Is it going to matter what that aspect ratio is because the content doesn't match that 1-to-1?
So
Well, it's not
remember,
going to matter because the people in the back of the room can't see
They
it.
can't
at
see
that
it
point.
anyway.
I can't see it
yeah.
anyway.
yeah, you can't see it anyway.
It doesn't
Remember
matter.
that
You should
future
know by
episode
now.
we did
It doesn't
a
matter.
long time ago? Do you know that future episode we did a long time ago, like
Yep.
way back in the day?
Yeah.
Remember
one we
that
did 20 years
3M
from now?
product? Yeah,
Yep.
remember that 3M product I developed that you just roll out for $5,000, you just window the shit out of that wall?
Yep.
There
It's
you
coming.
go.
That's what I was going to say just now, because like we're getting so used to having multiple windows resized and they're not fitting cleanly. Just wait, and the next couple of years, you're going to go to a movie if ever that ever happens again. You're going to sit down and you're going to have windows of commercials boxed around the movie that you've paid good money to go see. And so
here's
just
Yeah.
and it's going to be
Watch
off of
how
some
fast
kid's
they go back to that
laptop
theater.
up in the
Yeah.
booth. Or just,
That's off topic from that. When is it going to become socially acceptable to have the second screen experience at the movie theater? Like there's going to be barcodes and shit that you can just take pictures
Yeah.
of and second screen it.
Who was it? I think
And it's acceptable.
coming.
I
When I
think
quit
Regal
going.
tried it. I think it was Regal who tried that. They tried to make there's a texting section, and we'll put QR codes up on the during the previews. It was in the corners, I think, and you could then see an ad or something. But some of that stuff was interactive, was making noise, and people got pissed.
I just
Oh, the brightness of the phone. I'd be mad
Yeah.
at that. I mean, you got everybody using a phone in a theater. That's a hell of a lot of lumens in there.
I'm gonna start a theater. It's actually not gonna have any projection at all. It's just gonna be a sound system. You come in and watch it on your own phone, and we'll just do the
Oh my
surround
God.
sound for you. So it's gonna be sweet.
That's
it
just called
probably would
half-ass.
work.
yeah,
And you could charge more for it for a
terrible all the way
convenience
around, Mark.
fee.
It's coming.
Convenience
People-
fee.
Charge more for it.
Yeah, people are gonna pay
Convenience fee.
up for that. Yeah, to get this
Yeah.
sweet in the round sound.
And
it's
then
gonna,
Mark, when
big
your
money.
entire theater chains go out of business, you can act really surprised. Like, why
No,
It
because
won't because the Reddit and stock investors are going to keep me
no,
afloat.
I think this is genius because there's only going to be certain devices that are qualified for this. And if you don't have it, guess what?
Yeah.
There's a vending machine out front where you can go ahead and put your charge card in and get yourself a new phone or tablet.
but it's going to be vertical. It's not going to be horizontal.
all
It's
vertical.
made to watch vertically.
Yeah. I
wanna do it
still
where
come
it
across.
switches from wide to vertical during the movie.
Yeah,
You got to watch it like sideways.
and I know we're looking at it in the regards of we have to distribute this to multiple displays in multiple locations, and the folks coming from home, they don't like to Chris's example. They don't care if they have to route this thing to 16 different displays in the room, right? They just have one or two in a computer sense. But I do wonder. I'm fighting this now is the fact that people are getting used to having multiple displays, and I've had multiple requests for I want to, and I want to full screen everything. I don't believe in Windows. I not Windows, the operating system, Windows, the application Windows. But I don't believe in making it smaller. By God, I gave me 27 inches. I'm going to take all of it for my email. Like, well, why?
Mm-hmm.
But
Need it.
But I wonder. Yeah, I know that's a separate conversation, but it does play into this that how do we route this crap?
I think it goes
how
back to
do
that idea
we
of
do all that? And the easiest way is to
We'll
standardize
have to be aware.
it. Yeah.
Or not to standardize, because we're going to have to be aware of these and provide a system that allows different aspect ratios to be shown without, to Justin's earlier point, without affecting the signal chain, which means a lot of scalars and processors driving all this stuff, so that your signal chain is unaffected. But now we're back to the climbing a ladder at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday to reset something because it died. So
I just vote, just let the content go through naturally the way it is. let it run its birthday suit. Let it show up there all weird letterboxed in them. I do.
Yeah,
I let it.
I don't
do.
scale 16:9.
Yeah, I very rarely will scale
whatever
something.
shows up. I don't care.
And
yeah,
No,
I don't do that.
scale. I do set the EDID table, so it's forcing 16 by 9, but I always have a 4 by 3 at the very bottom that if it can't do what I want it to do, and that's
if you're
what's
not mature enough to do one of these, here's the one you get.
and that
Yeah,
might be
we
the best fallback
discovered-
for now, but yeah.
Yeah, we discovered turning up a new building. I think it was a couple years ago that Mac came out with a new resolution that did not fit our EDID tables, and that was a nightmare to go update every classroom because, and that's what's going to happen is one device that gets really popular out there comes up with a little tweak on an aspect ratio or resolution. We're going to have to go back and deal with all of our systems. Hopefully
I'd be
that
curious
never
to see what
happens,
you found
but-
on that because everything they're using is standard. So.
Well, I don't remember when it was,
Yeah, if
but
you-
they changed something. I don't know if it was a timing or a resolution or something happened
it's
to Mac
about the
laptops.
It's some of the Retina displays. If we, as the integrators, allow everything to go naked, like to Justin's point, then the Apple says
That's just them throwing way too many pixels down the
Apple
pipe.
says
Yeah.
you guess what, you get all of Retina, bam. But if you set that input EDID that says the most you can give me is this, then it's pretty good about sticking to that. And that is I know what he's talking about because it was quite a shock that Apple had just assumed that you can handle it and it'd just drive it, and you had to.
One faculty member,
one
one faculty member had this new laptop, plugged it in, it didn't work, and we're like, what? We go up there, work on it, start everything's working. Let's just go start messing with EDID, and shit started working. So we had to go back through the whole building.
Just gotta mess with it. Just gotta mess with it a little bit.
Well,
part of
so
it.
you guys weren't following best practice of building your EDID truth tables even before that. So that's on you. So anyway.
Well, see, that's the weird thing. We haven't had that complaint anywhere else on old legacy equipment. So I don't know. Maybe it was just that one laptop.
Well, so that said, I think we've identified to fix all your problems, run your content naked, but run everything at 16:9. It keeps everybody happy. Displays are 16:9. Set your 16:10 projectors to 16:9 by 16:9 screens and by 16:9 monitors for your lecterns and conference rooms and everyone. Those
Everything
complaints
looks
will
the same.
Yeah, those complaints
All
will
looks the same.
drastically drop off. Everything looks pretty good. Those people who can see the slight difference, they won't. And when someone brings in their own computer, which is 16:10, set your EDID tables so that it dumps a 16:9 immediately, because that way their screen is slightly window boxed,
Yes.
but everything else looks fine and people aren't complaining. So there you go. So 16:9 solves all your problems. Like I said, even to our conversation last week as far as resolutions, hey, go 720, one channel audio solves all your problems. So there you go.
Yep.
Find that lowest common denominator. There you are. So, but we got to take a quick break before our recording blows up.
It's 16.9. This recording, by the way, just so whoever's listening, it's being recorded in 16.9.
Recording this audio at 16.9.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
And welcome back. So we've had this crossroad conversations that we've been trying to dive into about where pedagogy and technology kind of merge. And one of the aspects is the difference between hybrid and hyflex and how everybody kind of has their own definitions for that. So the other day I was trying to explain this to my mother-in-law, who's not technical at all, and I was trying to come up with a good illustration that she would understand. And the way I explained it is hybrid learning is my wife and I deciding one day a week that we're going to let our son have hot dogs for dinner. And my son would always prefer to eat hot dogs for dinner, and we can work it into the schedule that one day a week and plan other meals to try to make up for the deficiencies in the nutritions that a hot dog dinner.
Wait a minute.
Let me just go through this and we can argue about hot dogs.
Now a message from the National Hot Dog Board.
Nice. Now, hyflex is allowing my son to choose which days of the week he gets to eat hot dogs, which means that our nutritional menu for the week will be regulated to the lowest common denominator of hot dogs, because anytime we try to sneak something else in there, he's going to default back to hot dogs.
So you get hot dogs and kale. That's all you get, hot dogs and kale.
And quinoa.
Exactly. And so I like quinoa. Now, the difference is with hyflex, we have a class full of 40 people, and any of those can choose to eat hot dogs at any given time. So you're really forcing the lowest common denominator of the two, and it limits your pedagogical styles. So that was my illustration to her. Any feedback from everybody else about what
I like that nutrition education thing.
Yeah, the hot dogs is a great way to explain that. I just want to add, I did add at the bottom of your little thing here, I said, and traditional learning is making everybody in the room take a bite out of the same hot dog.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I think it's a topic that is going to be all over the place this summer as folks prepare to come back into classes in the fall. We're going to have so many different variants on it, and I think there's some really good voices out there around this, and we'll have some things that we may agree are the same thing, but yet they may be called different, and there's going to be experiences that'll be radically different that don't meet any of these criteria. And so I think this is a really good conversation. It's going to be valuable as people think about potential modifications to spaces and that experience from the instructor or the experience from the student. I think we have to have a really good breakdown of kind of what's coming in the future and what to be ready for.
And I think we'll try to find some dietitians and some hot dog experts and
it's too much wiener talk.
It's a lot of wiener talk.
And so we'll try to locate some experts in the mastery of sausage making and bring them in and let them help guide us into the right directions.
I'm gonna run this analogy into the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Go eat a hot dog.
I am hungry now.
hate hot dogs almost as much as I hate hybrid learning. And with that,
yeah, I think.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, it's been a good show. We got it. So stick around for more on the next couple episodes as we get into this a little bit deeper for everybody. So
it's interesting to hear that hybrid's kind of become the default term for like you're back to the way it was 2 years ago, or it's hybrid, but that means something different to everyone. So.
It's hybrid, like colleges have been for the last 50 years.
Yeah, get ready. It's coming.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.